We are now at album number 3, in which Josh is going to be our leadoff man, but Matt is going to run the numbers first.
All right. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five with The Message comes in at number 559 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 62 in 1982, number 3,613 of all time. It is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. Did not make Rolling Stone's list. They come in at number 2,543 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And John, is this got to be a 1,001 album we need to hear before we die?
No, this is a John pick because I felt like we needed to have some representation of early hip hop. Yeah.
Yep. So okay. All right.
This was a John editorial decision for context, shall we say?
Yes. For the learning. And I approve of the pick for that reason. This, more than any other album that I can think of, shows the transition into rap and hip hop in a way that few albums do. This is not fully rap. They're not rapping all of the time. It's very much
it's like an R&B album at times.
Yes, R&B soul funk album most of the time, and sometimes they use samples, or sometimes Grandmaster Flash is on the ones and twos and they come in with different verses, but oftentimes it feels like a dance album, which is ultimately kind of where hip hop started in clubs and dance halls and
roller rinks.
Yes. And apartments, even house parties and things like that.
Yep.
So,
street fests.
Yeah. I mean, everyone will know The Message, which is far and away the most popular song on here. It's kind of a classic rhythm track that's been taken by Puff Daddy and other people, and so you would recognize that off the bat. But the rest of the album was pretty new to me. I definitely listened to this at some point along the way when I was getting into rap and kind of going through all the early stuff, trying to get a lay of the land, but I don't remember anything about it. And it's pretty entertaining. It's funky, it's danceable. It's the rapping is kind of the traditional old school rapping that you would think of. It's a bit slower, maybe not as lyrically fun or clever, although there is some funny lines in this album. And I also like when they rap in harmony together, like on the track Gets Nasty. They do that. That's something that I think doesn't always happen today in modern rap. That also takes a Tom Tom Club sample, which we've heard time and again.
My God, is that any sample used more than that Tom Genius of Love? I mean, it's in everything.
It's crazy. Scorpio, the third track, has it's all robotic voice, or like synthesized voice on this sample. And the other thing that is good on this is the kind of call and response that they have throughout, especially on a track like It's a Shame. So you really get an early flavor of a nascent art form in this. The most hilarious song is Dreaming, which seems to be a love letter to Stevie Wonder. And I just could not, I was like blown away by kind of what it was about. And, it just kept going. And they, they say he's the greatest and they wonder if they'll ever meet him. And it's just hilarious. So
they're as big a fan of Stevie Wonder as you guys are not a big fan of Stevie Wonder.
Really.
So.
they really love Stevie Wonder in a way that I didn't think was possible. And so that was, listen to that track, this album for that track alone. But The Message is the standout for me. It's the epitome of social commentary on a rap song and the importance of that. And it gets pretty dark. I was reading the lyrics as I was listening.
Oh yeah, Melly Mel's verse, the last one, is super dark.
Yeah, he's talking about killing yourself in prison after being raped and like becoming a stick-up boy and going to prison for that. And it's dark
male
stuff.
Prostitutes in there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, drugs, all the kind of classic things that would later become romanticized and hyped up in 90s and 2000s rap. That that is the dark side and is not good on this album. You know, not a good thing on this track. So it's fun. They don't really have, they kind of split up Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. They kind of separate ways. They don't really do another album together.
They do White Lines, though, which is an awesome song about cocaine.
Yeah, and I thought that was going to be on this album, and then I saw, no, it's a Melly Mel single, right? And and I think they had some beef too after a while, Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel.
They sure did.
And,
pretty famously.
Classic rap beef. And so, man, if that song was on here, that would have been awesome. But yeah, I think it's important. I think it's one of those albums that is important to listen to and to know, but you don't have to completely love it. I didn't completely love it, but I appreciated it for what it was, and I feel like it's a good it's good to have that understanding, especially when rap is, you know, it's kind of relatively new in the history of music, so you can do a pretty comprehensive study of it and kind of listen to all the important albums and you know, get the timeline of how things are in the art form. And this is an early important album, so thumbs up for that respect.
Yeah, it's important to, like, I'm going to give my take on this as like sort of bits, like commentary, but it's important in the context, right? The hip hop world at this point, there aren't really people recording albums, right? Like Sugar Hill Gang has the first like track, right? Single, that's released, which it was kind of like a race to see who's going to be first, and they do Rapper's Delight, right? And that's, I think, 79 maybe. And then I believe Curtis Blow is the first guy. Check out
Breaks.
Curtis Blow if you haven't heard him. That's an awesome album, The Breaks. But he, I remember I had to source the Innovators thing that was awesome. That was like, you know, that African Bambaataa and stuff were in it. But for context, though, this is still 2 years ahead of of Run DMC's first album. This is like 4 years ahead of LL Cool J and Big Daddy Kane and stuff. And I want to point out, because it kind of got lost with stuff, like hip hop was a New York innovation. And like, I think that gets lost because it's like hip hop's universe. Well, it is, but like hip hop like came from New York City. And this is a New York City album. This is an album talking about New York City. Early hip hop also was extremely socially conscious, which is all over this album. Even the dark tales are not told as like voyeuristic or romanticizing that type life. At no point when they're singing about like urban life in difficult ways are they sort of saying you should aspire to do this. It's more like a documentary film to some degree, I would say. There's also a lot of like love and positivity on tracks in this, you know. So I want to say that lyrically is there. Yeah, that Melly Mel verse is one of the best lyrics of all of his second verse. Is one of the best verses, right, in all of probably hip hop ever, but early hip hop certainly. Because
wait, which track are you talking about?
This would be The Message, because that's the big one that people would know. Yeah, it's the last track. It's basically where he talks about like a young guy who gets caught up in the life, right? Like the story, it's basically the story that's become like a hip hop cliche, but like it was even like lines in this track, you know, that are the cliches like, I got my hand on my gun because you got me on the run, which like has been repurposed like 7,000 times, right? Like this is the first time that like that's really dropped, you know, in a line. So there's a lot of stuff just being brought up. I'd also like to point out that this is like a fantastic album cover. It's like almost comically awesome as like a depiction of between outfits and the poses, and there's a gigantic boombox, and there's people just posing in the middle of like a New York City crosswalk. It's like if you were to try to picture early New York City hip hop, like it would be what that looks like. It's like sort of disco refugees with a harder edge, I guess would be. And bucket hats are there as like what LL Cool J I think would popularize a little bit later. It's pretty awesome. I would say that outside of The Message, which people are going to be familiar with, I think She's Fresh and Scorpio are probably my two favorites. Scorpio is an interesting sort of disco bass track, which is where a lot of these samples are coming from, is the disco era, along with Tom Tom Club, which I feel like was just rife for samples. But yeah, this is an album that I both enjoy, but also almost has to be listened to, because you really to trace hip hop's roots, like we're gonna try to do, and we're gonna do a ton, especially as we get to like the '90s and the '00s, right? Like hip hop's all over, and probably by 2010, it's gonna be the primary genre we're gonna be covering, right? It's kind of, I think it's important to kind of see the proto elements of it, and in the same way that like Buddy Holly or like, you know, Elvis would be it for rock, I feel like that's where we're at right now with hip hop, where it's a New York based thing, where it's primarily the headliner's the DJ at this era. And if you get somebody to rap on your record, great. But it's really the DJ is the guy that brings people into the arena, which is something that kind of got lost. Yeah, it kind of got lost by the end of the 80s. But if you think of the 80s, right, you know, with Run DMC, you know, their DJs right there. DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, right? Spinderella for Salt and Pepper. Eric B and Rakim, right? Like Eric B's the DJ, right? It's all these acts. The DJ is right there. And then by the time the 90s comes, I mean, you've got the beat makers, right? Like the Dr. Dre's and stuff, but they've largely kind of been repurposed as either behind the scenes guys, or they also have to have like a rap profile, right? I mean, even Kanye West, right? He would have been he started off kind of as a beat maker, almost like in the role of a DJ, right? Before he became. So, and I mean, he's kind of the last guy I can remember who kind of was a beat maker before blowing up as a hip hop guy. Now you kind of just are a rapper, right? Or a performer. And so I do want to mention that this is still the era of the DJ as almost having primacy in the craft, in the genre, or at least, you know, by the mid to late 80s that there's equality between the two parts.
That's a good point.
So. What'd you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I like this, and it's. I obviously knew the message. I remember I said that last week. Oh, the message! I know that song, and I only said that because like I knew the term the message. I'm like, I know what that is. I didn't know what the beat was or what the. And then as soon as I heard, it, I was like, oh yeah, it's this one. And that to me, I mean, what a great. I mean, especially like on contrasted against all the other songs on here, it's just like, yeah, this is a different level here. This album overall is a mixed bag, right? And you guys kind of touched on some of those things. You know, I thought the entire album would be, you know, kind of a rap hip hop based kind of thing. I wasn't expecting the more R&B soul type songs that you were getting here, and so those were not. I'm with you guys. Those were not my favorite. Dreamin' made me laugh. I mean, that's basically like that reminded me of like The Girl Is Mine, only it's about Stevie Wonder. And it's like, I'm trying to go like, is this tongue in cheek? And at some parts it's like, yeah. And other parts I'm like, I think they really, 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 really love Stevie Wonder. Like, you know, and sometimes you're like, maybe just more than an artist, you know, which was kind of funny. It's just the way that they were kind of, Stevie, you're just so great. Like, you know, it's just, it's comical.
Yeah,
so,
they're like super fans or something.
Yeah, big time. And actually,
they almost sound like Michael Jackson, like Childish Wonder, you know?
That's what I'm saying. It was like, it reminded me of The Girl Is Mine, you know, the breakdown of the Michael, you know, Paul, it's my girl. She's a, you know, so it's very much in that vein. And actually Stevie Wonder's credit, I got a writing credit here with It's a Shame. So somehow he was involved.
Well,
with,
it's one
with
of his
sample
beats.
there. Yeah. So
sample, yeah.
So I really like. So obviously I knew the message. Really like that song. That's just, and it's like, yeah, there's a reason why that's sampled. It sounds great here. It sounds great when it's been. I think Ice Cube did it as well. You know, use it as well before Puff Daddy. But I really like She's Fresh. That's got a real that was a good mix of like the hip hop with kind of like, that's like a Sly and the Family Stone guitar lick that's going on in the background there.
I thought the same thing. Yep.
And so I thought that was a strong opener. It's Nasty. I recognized that beat. I didn't know that was a Tom Tom Club thing. So while you guys were talking, I pulled up and I was like, yeah, I'd never heard that Tom Tom Club
You
song.
never heard... How could you have never heard that beat before?
No, I've heard the beat before. I didn't know it was from Tom Tom Club, and I didn't. I know
okay,
when you guys said the name of the song and I pulled it up, I was like, yeah, I mean, I know the beat, but like, did Mariah Carey do that? That's I was thinking Mariah Carey when I heard
Fantasy
that. Okay,
Fantasy remix,
So. Right? So that's what I thought of. That's where I went. And so when I heard it here, I was like, oh, they started it, and then you guys were like, no, it was Tom Tom Club, and I'm like, jeez, I don't freaking know anything. So, you know, so I really
who Tom Tom Club is, don't you?
Yeah, it's the Talking Heads married
Side
couple
project.
there. Yeah, right. So which makes sense because I remember you mentioning, John, that they were very much them and Blondie. Very much into like, you know, the understanding the
Early
forward,
hip-hop.
the progression that music's going to go in this direction. So, I got to disagree with you, John. Scorpio annoyed me. That was the most 80s sounding song on here. I thought it's almost like that. It's like breakdancing. It's like that's. I'm sure that's what people are breakdancing to. But the robot voice got to me. I was like, the whole song, the robot voice was annoying.
You have to imagine people breaking. Like, that's kind of like impossible to not think of like people,
Right.
Like doing like,
Yes.
complex, and that's what it was a good vibe for me. So
Yeah, and I get that, but like as a dude just like out walking his dog, listening to this, I was like, okay, that's enough. I've had enough of the robot voice. So that was a bit much. It's a shame. And that's the other thing too. I'm picking up on here is like there's definitely, and I'm by obviously no means a rap aficionado, but the raps the lyrics here, not just the lyrics, but the flow is very rudimentary. It's very basic. I mean, it kind of reminds me, if you go back to just the basics of like rock and roll, like if you just listen to some basic, a Little Richard or a Buddy Holly type song, it's just, it's the foundational stuff, which is still real. It's still good. But like if you grew up listening to the more advanced versions of that, and then you come back to this, you're probably going to be nonplussed, right? You're probably just going to be like, that guy's not a good rapper. Like that rhyme was not very creative, that's not very thought provoking, whatever, but like you have to take it in the context in which it came out. And so really listening to this here and comparing it to what we've listened to already, in some ways, this is kind of coming out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like there's really been nothing. Okay, you got the Blondie Rapture, rap, the Fab Five Freddy thing that we just talked about. I don't even know if that was in an album. We just talked about that, but like
that was the video, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really this is really just spawning a brand new genre that's really. I mean, some of the songs here, obviously R&B, soul, you can kind of drift, but like the rap itself is a very unique kind of thing. So that's just to me that was a very fascinating thing thinking about listening to this
that's
album.
a good point.
I'll disagree a little bit with you, Matt, because I think it's coming from a lot of places, just being synthesized different. Like there's R&B. I mean, It's a Shame is like a Stevie Wonder song. If you the positivity, it's like children are the future. It's like very much like funky. I think you were right on, Matt, with She's Fresh. Sounds like this album, if I were to compare it to anything, and I think you nailed it, it sounds like Stand by Sly and the Family Stone, just in an 80s context.
Yeah, right.
And
not the other one that we covered. I forgot that was definitely a different.
There's a Riot. Well, that's
not that one.
Totally
not that
different.
one. Early Sly, right?
Yeah, and it's so I see like you can draw direct lines, right? And when you have samples, you get like clues from where they came, and it's like 70s R&B, and there's a reason that like as hip hop went on, the samples were like Parliament, right, and Diana Ross albums from the late 70s and early 80s, because disco and funk are two of the primary areas that hip hop comes from, along with call and response spirituals, right, and R&B music, and then sort of rapping was just an evolution.
I guess maybe it's more of the rapping, not necessarily the music.
That's what I was going to say. I think that's what you're talking about. The actual rapping part we haven't heard before.
Right. That's
right, and that's new.
Right, and that's the beats and stuff like that are kind of generated from other places. But yeah, like the idea of like, I'm not going to sing this, right? Or even speak it. Because speaking is stuff we heard before, but like, I'm going to do this intentional rhythm, flow, rhyming scheme. And I'm inventing a new way of like, communicating.
That is
You're
the
not
novel
singing,
part.
Yes.
Scratching too,
and the
turntables. And that was the other thing, because I'm just seeing here on Wikipedia that I didn't realize this, but there's an 8th track on here, "The Adventures of Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel," which is actually a bonus song, I think. It was in the reissue or whatever in 2002.
It's a DJ track,
right? And it's a DJ track, and that's why I was kind of listening to that, thinking, this is what Girl Talk came from. These DJs that this is what they do. They just take all these different songs, because you've got Rapture on there, you've got Another One Bites the Dust, you've got the Sugar Hill Gang, that whatever, I forget the name of that song. Rapper's Delight's on there, and it's just like he's putting all that stuff together. So yeah, it makes sense. I see what you're saying about the DJ being. I could see the DJ being the more popular
very
person.
New York thing. It's a very New York thing, because disco was also the DJ was the king, right? Like what they spun. And,
especially too
to this day, like Funkmaster Flex, right, on Hot 97 in New York is still like he'll just like on the weekends. It's like Funkmaster Flex playing his DJ set, and you just basically you get to hear that still. It's a vestige. So it's very much a part of hip hop in general, but especially like New York City hip hop for sure.
Well, and especially at this time because the rapping was so much in its infancy that it wasn't like this. It was still cool, but like the attraction here was the DJ, the beats and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I liked it. It's definitely mixed, right? I think She's Fresh, It's Nasty, and The Message are easily the best songs on here for me. And the other ones are kind of interesting. I was surprised by the fact that there's R&B stuff on here, which again, not my favorite thing, especially not R&B in and of itself, but the way that they're kind of doing it. Like You Are didn't really do much for me, the slower kind of thing. But I like Dream, but I could listen to that. It just made me laugh. It was funny, and the other thing too I will say is I did pick up on the positivity. I think that was that You Are, where they were just like, you know, yeah, life's tough, but we're all going to get through it because God loves us all. And I'm like, man, when's the last time a rapper talked like that? Like, I don't know, maybe I don't hear a whole lot, but it's like
there's the positive. Like the common, common sense. And,
Macklemore,
Jurassic 5.
Yeah.
Well,
that was it. Jurassic 5, yes, because you said that, Josh. You said that there's the harmony, kind of the multi people rapping, and Jurassic 5 definitely came up because they do that a lot too, and it's kind of I like that. And the Beastie Boys as well. I like it when they kind of somebody does a line and then another person jumps on with them, and then another person goes solo, and then three of them come in. So I like the back and forth nature of that. That is cool.
Yeah, that's always been a genre in hip hop, even to the modern day, of consciousness rap and stuff like that. Of course, it's often also mixed with things like, what is it, 5%ers, or what's the group like Logic and stuff that always makes it very interesting because it's filtered through different stuff. But I think this was an important album to listen to, especially. I think it's more than just a learning album, but I do think it's important to listen to as a learning album. And we're going to get spoon-fed in a good way hip-hop at a manageable level throughout the 80s so that it doesn't come too quick and we can't appreciate the nuances before it becomes, a staple of the podcast. So
we're not doing Boogie Down Productions, are we?
We are, yep.
Oh, we are? Good. Okay.
Criminal-minded, I think.
If you are...
Oh, yeah, yep.
If to end my final thought, if you're interested in kind of the early history of hip hop, there's a really good comic book series, graphic novel series called Hip Hop Family Tree by Ed Piskor, and it's multi-volume, and it basically takes you through an encyclopedia of the original, of all of the early years of hip hop, all of the major players, and in a fun kind of informative way through comic books art. So that's a good way to learn about kind of really everything and the rise of it in New York City.
Good rec there, Josh. And I believe Piskor was the genre of what my band was. The early all right. I would give this one a thumbs up. I enjoyed this album.
Yeah, I would too, even though there's filler on here, but the stuff that's really good is really good. So.
Mm-hmm.